Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Simple Living High Thinking, where we unpack the Bhagavad Gita weekly based on Tukram Prabhu's Gita class every Friday night. It's currently June 14th, 2020, so last night's class was obviously focused a lot around the death of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement and how we fit in all that as a spiritualist. So I think for this week, I'm just thinking we'll open it up to a discussion of what it means to be part of a spiritual revolution, how do spiritualists react, or how should we react and view what's going on and what's our role in this. So what would you guys like to discuss first?
So I think with every group of people that get together, whether it is a company or a community, and ours being a spiritual community, there is always a diverse viewpoint, different ways in which we digest both material and spiritual topics and formulate, therefore, a broader perspective from different points of views. I think this is one incredible gift that Krishna consciousness gives us, specifically ISKCON, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, that we are part of, mainly because, especially, the three of us here, we do have a Latin, an Asian, and an African. And therefore, we inevitably, we have different views, but never going too far away from our main view, which is the spiritual one. And I think that brings a very healthy balance in our ability to do what we're doing here, meaning our intention is to give out spirituality to those that are interested, perhaps even beginners in spiritual life. And I think between the three of us here, there's a good diversity in that viewpoint, which is very healthy, and that allows us to come up with a bigger, more complete understanding. So I will start again by reiterating part of what I spoke about last episode. Again, we're still talking about George Floyd. And I think my viewpoint and Varangi's viewpoint, as well as yours, Kim, they are again centered in our most valuable solution, which is the spiritual one. But yet, due to our natural differences growing up, being in male, female, Black, Asian, Latin bodies are slightly different. So again, I can speak for my experience, which I think Varangi has also more detailed view today that she would like to share. And I'm very curious to hear that as well. And I do believe that I focus on the inner aspect of the Black community more so than she does. And I think together our comments and understanding is very good, broaden, and not leaving any aspect out. So again, to my point of view, I think it is very important to work not in just one front of the issue, but on our fronts. And front number one is, to me, is to really try to identify what is the main source of injustice that is done to Black communities, let's say. And if I was to ask myself that question in my approach, I would like to have both a local, eminent, right in front of me aspect, like when I go out in the streets of LA, let's say, or Orange County or San Diego, like what do I see? That's like imminence right in front of me, right? As well as the entire country or the entire continent. Again, having experiences being from Brazil and other countries in Europe as well. Like, what have I seen? And then, you know, getting broader and broader and broader all the way to the spiritual. So I tend to focus a lot on the right in front of me, Black people, and the so-called injustice or the actual injustice that is done to them, and what is the root cause of that. And to me, it's inevitable to like, I cannot ignore what I believe to be the main cause of the problem for Black people in America and also Brazil, which I believe to be us ourselves. Again, that's not to say that there isn't an oppression from the outside, from other races that oppresses Blacks or other minorities as well. But again, because of have spent a lot of time with a lot of Blacks in all of the basketball teams that I've played for, I am talking here literally over 100 different Black men from different backgrounds, different states, different countries, different mentalities, and spending a considerable amount of time with them. It's not just that we got together, we hang out and a few times and then that was it. Like, no, when you spend an entire season with each other, going through many obstacles, because we're trying to win a basketball championship and a lot of work has to be put into it. And this is quite difficult. It's a lot of effort. So then you really get to understand people's nature, people's psychology, people's reactions to the challenges of life, and you engage with those people for like a year, for an entire year. So you really get to know them deeply, So I have had this opportunity to be with over 100, like 150 of such Black men, and also, some white teammates as well, but most of them were Black. And their experiences, like teammates, roommates, suite mates, traveling mates, and you get to really spend it. Sometimes it's actually interesting. You get to a point where you're comfortable being vulnerable and expressing the unfortunate circumstances that you were brought up in, and you get a chance to really go deep and understand each other. So there's that part of my views. And then there's the other part, which is when I like to do research and look from a statistical point of view, from police departments, New York Police Department, Chicago Police Department, LAPD, right? And look at the data that they have collected and shared. When I add those two, and also in Brazil, and also studying human psychology, when I add all of that, to me, it's inevitable to see that the Black community is being hurt the most by themselves. Statistically speaking, 80% of all Black people that die from a gun, like a violent crime, they were killed by other Blacks. It is let's say something that I think is, there are many gangs, right? And vice lords, and so many, but I think two of the most prominent ones, it's Bloods and Crips, right? Green, blue and red. And you see that the majority of these people are being killed by the other gang member or by the other drug dealers. And what is the really root cause of the injustices that is being done to Black people? Who are killing Black people the most? If Black lives matters, that's a fact, but white lives matters and brown lives matters. All life matters. That's why we as spiritualists, we don't even eat meat, because we believe that animal lives matters, right? So all lives matters. If we're going to specifically look at Black lives and how their lives are cut short because they were killed by a gun or by a knee on their neck, then the most instances of that unfortunate scenario is being carried out by Black people themselves. So it is, first of all, Black people who should become aware of the fact that Black lives matters, and not just kill each other if we were non-essential animals, because we are killing each other. I mean, I think it's back in my basketball days growing up, I was really into Tupac, the hip hop superstar. And there are so many lyrics of his, and one is, I guess you can say, rhyming slash poetic, where he says, quote, "And it is the white man they say I should fear, but it is my own kind doing all the killing here." So that's Tupac, somebody who was born and raised in the ghetto and died by a gun, lived by the gun and died by a gun, you know. And in Gita class last Friday, I brought up an example of a boy. This is very sad, just because I'm a father of 3 now, and I think about the age that we're discussing here. We have a 11-year-old boy. His nickname was Little Yummy because of his passion for cookies. He really liked cookies. So then people nicknamed him Yummy, but he was 11 years old. So at the age of 11, he had already committed 10 different murders. I'm saying this guy had a gun and he went up to other black people, not whites, not Asians, not Latins, but black, on his block, and killed over 10 of them. Now, then the different organizers of gangs around those blocks recognized and realized that this Leo Yummy was becoming too dangerous and that they needed to stop him because he's 11 years old, totally running out of control. And then they sent out a 14-year-old to assassinate him. So now we have a 14-year-old black kid going and murdering an 11-year-old black kid. This is insane. This is 11 and 14. Can we think about that for a moment? Now, because Leo Yummy became quite prominent, even Tupac mentions him directly in one of his songs called Me Against the World. Tupac directly mentions him. In fact, Tupac even almost got in trouble. He went to Chicago where this kid got killed and started cursing at all the gang members that were attending his show and chastising them for having done such a thing, killing an 11-year-old. Certainly he wasn't a nice 11-year-old because he himself had already killed 10 others, but still he's 11-year-old, and Tupac thought that was really bad. And then the crowd went against them. And that's when Tupac and all of his rap colleagues almost got killed themselves. Again, by other blacks, right? So when you look at the life of Lil Yummy, because he became famous, there's a Wikipedia page on him. You can just Google, just Lil Yummy, a bunch of stuff come up. You can see a mugshot of him like this, right? You can see lots of anger, deep, dark, perhaps deepest and darkest anger a human being can possess at 11 years old. When you look at his Wikipedia page and you read his upbringing, this Lil Yummy was first met with the law at 3 years old. Now, I have a 3-year-old. That's insane to me. He was brought to human services at 3 years old, and he had cigarette burns throughout his arm. That's at the age of 3. His mother was incarcerated 30 different times. And all 30 different times were related to illegal drugs in the act of prostitution. So this is a prostitute that got incarcerated because of the act of prostitution as well as the illegal drugs that were going on when prostitutes do what they do. 30 different times she was incarcerated because of that. Now, that's Lil Yum's mother. Lil Yum's father, there was never any contact there because he was in prison for life for committing murder against another black man, right? So that's a father that he never met because he was in prison for life because he killed another black man. The mother was in prison 30 times, and the man that she was with when she got to prison, they were also in prison, and they were all black. And again, 30 times, and that's Lil Yummy for you. So whose fault is this? Exactly which other race prevented Liriyami from having a father and a mother, if not by the Black race itself? At what point does that end? So if Black Lives Matters, then perhaps Liriyami's father should be aware of that and know that my 3-year-old son who is growing up without a mother and without me, that his life matters and that I should be there. Do at least say, hi, I love you. No, things may be tough, we may be poor, we may be discriminated against, but we are here, I'm here, and I love you. And maybe we can get out together. And how about his mother? And then obviously one may think, well, but then what was Liriyami's father's life like when he was growing up? And what was his mother situation like growing up? Well, it's very easy to know. Then Liriyami's father was also not there. He was also a gang member. He was also shot and killed many other Black people. And so was his mother. So where does it end? But as far as I can see, as far back as we go, it is just Blacks not being there for Blacks. I'll take it back. I'm very precise. I'm very particular about speech and language. So I don't like to misuse words. I shouldn't say it is just Blacks killing Blacks. It is not just Blacks killing Blacks, but the vast majority is. So Black Lives Matters, and I think Black people should be aware of that and stop treating each other that way. So I think that one of the main root cause of the behavior that brings about discrimination is Blacks not being there for themselves. Blacks not realizing that we are human beings and we should treat each other with dignity. That was Malcolm X's philosophy. And Malcolm X is a person who died for this cause. It is not just like Dr. Luther King as well. But Malcolm X, I will speak about him very briefly here. This is a guy who understood, in essence, the same issue that I'm describing here, that the Black community was killing the Black community itself. And that the root cause of that was intoxication and unwanted children. That due to the fact that so many Blacks that were constantly drunk, chemically dependent, crack cocaine, etc., were just numbing their mind, and they have no capabilities of thinking for themselves because they're constantly intoxicated. And then obviously engaging in lust and producing unwanted children that they're not going to take care of. Hence, Liriyami, right? The exact example that I just brought up here. So Malcolm X at a young age realizes that's a roots problem and he wants to stop that. That's when he meets Elijah Muhammad, a Black leader of Muslims in America. And he sees that Elijah Muhammad, through the teachings of Islam, is being able to stop Black people from getting intoxicated and stop Black men from abusing Black women and producing unwanted children, and that would be the solution. And he joins then the Black Muslim movement, becomes the most prominent leader of Black Muslims himself, largely in part because his phenomenal skills of public speaking. He spoke like no other, becomes one of the main leaders of Black Muslim, and tries to spread then Islam, because he believes that the Black people will take to Islam and they will be sober and stop producing unwanted children, and that Black people then will have an opportunity to get out of the ghetto and stop being discriminated against and become owners of their own businesses and vote for the people that they want to establish the rules in their own communities, which he called Black nationalism. Now, interesting enough, Muhammad Elijah, unfortunately, was not an honorable spiritual leader like our own beloved Prabhupada. And he himself fathered 8 unwanted children with 8 different women, which then is brought up to Malcolm X, who feels completely betrayed because he dedicated his life to this cause. Let's stop mistreating our Black women. Let's stop impregnating them and leaving them with the children by themselves. Now, there was a peculiar rule in Islam that if you raise a bastard child, that you are supposed to be ridiculed in public and expelled from the movement. That's one of their rules. So the 8 women that were impregnated by Muhammad Elijah himself were ridiculed and expelled from the community, as their laws would say should have to be done. And it wasn't just 8 children, because some of these women had more than 1 child, right? So then Malcolm X realized this and says, no, that's not right. And he decides that he's going to denounce his leader, Muhammad Elijah. However, there's another peculiar rule in that aspect of Black Muslims, is that if you're going to criticize your leader in public to such a extreme condemnation like this, that you yourself are going to be killed. You can't just denounce your leader like that. It's one of the rules of Islam. And Malcolm X has an interview where they're talking about this. Malcolm X has already become public about it. And then the interviewer asks him, like, are you not afraid that you're denouncing your leader like this? Because according to your own rules, you're going to be assassinated. His answer was, I am a dead man already. I know that. It is just a matter of time. But I am going to do it anyways, because first and foremost, I stand for the Black people. I truly believe that to stop intoxication and to stop producing unwanted children is what's best for Black people, and I will die for that cause. And it was only 2 weeks later that 3 men walked in the place where he was giving a public sermon and shoots him in his head in daylight in front of hundreds of people. And that's how Malcolm X dies, for this exact cause, for the cause of teaching Blacks that we should be sober and we should not father and or mother unwanted children, because they're going to become a problem to society, and mainly a problem to us ourselves, because when you're 11 years old and you have already killed 10, you're not going to have many opportunities in life. And Malcolm X died for this cause. So, you know, when I cite him, it's not light. He's not a person who at one point, you know, felt that, well, some injustice is being done against Black people. I'm going to go to the streets real quick. I'm going to shout out a few words. And then, you know, a year later, it's just life as normal. No, this is a person who died for this cause. And that was his understanding as well. That's why he's one part of what he preached a lot was, let's go back to Africa. Now, I think that's a bit much. I don't think it's going to work to get millions of people out of the United States and take them back to Africa. There's going to be a logistics issue there. But the main point was, let's go back to Africa and see what it's like, Black culture that did not come from slavery, that own their own businesses, that behave like Prabhupada wants us to behave, sober and respecting each other in an international house. And then you regain your dignity, and then you can go anywhere in the world and be accepted and not discriminated against. Because again, capitalism is stronger than racism. People that are CEOs of multinational companies, if you have a skill to provide, they're not going to discriminate against you because you're Black or any other race. Look at Microsoft's CEO. That's an Indian man. Which white man kept him from becoming Microsoft's CEO? So if you have a skill, if you have dignity, if you're sober, if you have an honorable family, it is not to say that racism is never going to be there, but it's going to be drastically reduced. And to expect that we're going to wipe out all racism from the face of the earth is very naive. Because Krishna himself in the Bhagavad Gita says that the material world in which we live is a place of misery. So a place of misery is not a place where everybody gets along all of the time. And Krishna also says elsewhere in Bhagavad Gita that we have 3 miseries, that we suffer 3 miseries. Miseries due to nature, miseries due to our own body and mind, and miseries due to other people. That's embedded in the system. Other people will cause other people misery. Krishna says that in Bhagavad Gita. And is the entire cosmic manifestation, that is to say, upper planetary system, heavenly systems, our system, earthly systems, and the hellish systems are all places of misery. So racism is part of that. It's never going to be wiped completely. Again, that's not to say that there should be no effort to try to minimize it. There should be many efforts around trying to minimize it. And I think that's where Varangi and her views are quite valuable to this discussion. There should be efforts to minimize it. And made on all fronts. I tend to focus on the front of the Black community itself. I think Varangi has a lot to add in terms of what are other fronts from outside of the Black community itself, what can be done in other areas to minimize it. So it should be minimized, but it's never going to end. Otherwise, Krishna wouldn't have said that one source of misery for us souls in this body is other people, and that this is a place of miseries. So it can be minimized, it should be minimized, but it's never going to be eliminated. And if we Black people take care of ourselves, statistically speaking, 80% of the problem is going to be eliminated, because we're going to be treating each other with dignity. We're going to be giving each other the opportunity to not live in ghettos, to not produce little yummies who at 11 years old has killed 10 and is murdered by another 14. That's just us looking out for ourselves. First of all, we should know Black lives matters, the Black community themselves. And that would be according to all police departments, that would take care of 80% of the problem. So, rant's over.
Yeah, I've always been very curious about what leads people to spirituality, because that's kind of why we're here is, okay, we have these situations going on in the world. Everyone has their personal experiences to different degrees. And what is going to make someone step back, stop the cycle? Because when you talk about Maslow's hierarchy, where at the very first level, it's food and water. And when I first got into spirituality many years ago, I talked to my sister about it. And back then she was struggling to pay the electric bill and, you know, feed her children, and with a husband who ditched them and went off to China. And so she said to me, okay, this is all great and I'm very happy for you, but happiness, joy, spirituality, these are all luxury emotions. She called them luxury emotions. And it really made me take a step back and have empathy for her, because these people are fighting to survive. They're not going to sit back and say, okay, how can I be more spiritual? How can I have more compassion for people, when they are just striving to survive? So for the people who, you know, listen to this podcast, who are curious about spirituality, I think that it's so valuable to have your perspective today on, you know, being a Black man, being a Black spiritualist, and Varangi, and just to, you know, kind of echo Tukaram Prabhu's teachings about how does a spiritualist view what's going on in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And Varangi, I'm very curious to hear your thoughts, but to complete your thought, Kim, yes, it's absolute, you're right on point. It's really difficult to talk about, let's provide service for others, let's love God, the ultimate lover, if you have to worry about a 11-year-old shooting you to death, right? It's really difficult to accomplish that. But from a Black spiritualist or white spiritualist, man or woman, rich or poor, lesson number one from Bhagavad Gita, lesson number one from Krishna to Arjuna, we're not these bodies anyways, to begin with. We are spirit souls. It's really difficult to bring that message across when you're struggling to survive. But yeah, that's why International Society for Krishna Consciousness works. We are all servants of God instead of our bodies. And we do have many teachings that we believe can solve all these problems once and for all. But it does require you to have your basic needs met. I think you're right on point with that, Kim. I think if those that are listening and are wanting a way out, no, there is a way out. That's why we do what we do in this podcast, to bring that message out. But yes, if you're struggling to survive, it's much more difficult, and that's why we're spending so much time on this topic that is eminent right now. So please, Varangi,
Yeah, I'll
share our
jump
thoughts.
in. Thank you. Thank you both. Great points. I definitely share your perspective. I guess I wanted to read the text that we covered yesterday and go from there. So that was we're still on chapter 3, text 28. One who is in knowledge of the absolute truth does not engage himself in the senses and sense gratification, knowing well the differences between work in devotion and work for fruitive results. And this text is coming right after Krishna is telling Arjuna how, that spiritualist, once he or she has attained, transcendence, doesn't stop doing his duty. He continues doing his duty, but now he's doing them, his duties, to set an example for the rest of the people. And when he comes across sincere people who are not ready to hear it all and take on the whole truth, he figures out a way to engage them in this process, not to take them away from their work because they're attached to that work and those fruits of their labor, but little by little, he'll guide them through this process so they can make progress and eventually learn the art of working for the divine, just like that person has done, just like the spiritualist has done. And so at this point, we hear that this spiritualist, after getting this truth and practicing it, he's able to see that everything in this world is happening as the interaction between karma and our conditionings and the modalities of the world, ignorance, passion, and goodness. And we've talked a little bit about these 3 modes in past episodes. So you can definitely tune into that if you want a little more in detail to understand this, I guess, little conversation about where we're at. So I found that deeply important at this point in the Gita and at this point in I guess, what we're going through in society, because it really reiterates the fact that we need to get to that point. That before we get to that point of being a master of knowledge, and not just any knowledge, not just like physics and chemistry and politics and all these other things, but the king of knowledge, which is spiritual knowledge. Once we become masters of that knowledge, then we're actually going to be able to detach ourselves enough from this labyrinth of materialism to be able to understand what is illusion and what is reality, what is eternal and what is temporary, what we are and what we're not, what is worthy of us devoting our whole life to and what isn't, right? So only a person that is in knowledge, that is in that platform that transcends the gunas, the 3 modes of material nature, and is able to control his senses and is no longer living for sense enjoyment, can really understand that he is something separate from his senses and from his own conditionings. Sosa brought up this really important point of the cycle of what, in your perspective, Sosa, not perspective, but obviously in your experience as a soul in a black body in this lifetime, what you have seen. And of course, I'm a person of color, so my conditionings are different. And even within my own race, within my own community of people of color, we're also different too, because we're souls that have just transmigrated from one soul to another for so many lifetimes. So we're just keep adding on and adding on to conditionings and more conditionings. And something that actually really impacted me from last night's class that Tukaram Prabhu brought up was that I it's fair to say that at this point, we don't have full freedom because of all the layers of conditionings that we have been building up from lifetime to lifetime. So we could really say that there's no full freedom anymore, but we do have the freedom to learn how to react to the world and reality, not to change or to control everything that's going on. We don't have absolute control over anything, even in our own lives. But we certainly still have that little bit of freedom to react to something in a positive way or in a negative way. And so this concept was super important to bring up in this whole conversation about racism, about lives mattering and different colors of lives mattering, and what are we going to do about it, and how can we find a solution. And so I think one of the things that I have been thinking about lately, by hearing all my illustrious teachers and fellow spiritualists, is that when I think about it, I'm listening, for example, today to all your examples, Sosa, and just reading all the other things and watching all the other things that are coming up on social media and everything. I'm starting to realize, and this is something that I think I have realized before, but now more than ever, that we're all actually suffering from the same thing. There's really not such a thing that, oh, well, that's only unique to the Black community. That's only unique to the Latino community. That's only unique to the Asian community, or that's only unique to the whatever other community. Actually, we have all suffered segregation, racism, pain, death. Like even just yesterday, I was talking to my husband, and he was saying, I don't think I've ever talked about this, but actually I was in high school and I got beat up by 4 Black kids, like stomped on, and I thought we were friends, and they thought it was a joke. And I didn't see it as a racial thing until like years later. I was like, oh yeah, that happened to me. Oh, that's interesting. I was the only Black kid and they were stepping on me. And he was saying, you know what was so powerful about that experience? That I didn't feel in my heart that I hated them or I wanted to get revenge. I thought, well, that was mean. Of course, I'm not going to do something to get back at them. Why would I perpetuate that? That's not who I am. Like, I'm just not that type of person. Let's move on. And he like totally forgave them and like whatever, was like cool with them again. And I'm thinking like, that's not right. But that's not right, not because they're Black and you're white, or because what if it was flipped? It was 4 white kids and a Black kid. I mean, it probably would have been a lot worse of a situation. A lot more people would have probably gotten involved, and it would have been like, I don't know, on the news. So what makes it wrong? I don't think it's so much about the color of who's down there and who's doing the stepping on and who's doing the bad action. It's really the fact that we as humans, having the capability of using our brain, which is our biggest asset, are engaging in these acts without any regard for life, for feelings, for just like knowledge of who we truly are. And that's really what's so painful. That when I've talked to any person, regardless of their heritage or color or whatever, we've all experienced some degree of those, like, of that type of segregation or exclusion, or like, you don't belong here, you're different, you're not us, we're not with you, and it's us versus you. And that's how it's just going to be. And so running with this idea, inevitably that conclusion is, well, the root of all this is a misrepresentation, like thinking that we are this body, thinking that it's us versus them, thinking that we deserve justice because we have suffered so much, and really having no realization that other people, including the white people, have also suffered, have also gone through things. I mean, not to say that to the same extent. I disagree. I think that when a Black person or the Black community is doing these type of protests, and it's represented by the BLM emblem or whatever, that they don't have the right to do so. I think so. I think they've suffered long enough and hard enough for them to rise up and express themselves in whatever way they want to. I think that's okay, personally speaking. Just like it's okay for me to talk about the injustices that have been made to me or my family, or the millions of immigrants that are suffering right now because they broke the law and they're treated like worse than animals are treated, or just as bad as we treat the poor animals that we're slaughtering daily. At a certain point, it's okay for anybody that has suffered to express themselves and to say, hey, something has to change. This isn't right. I think the difference is, and what needs to be checked is, or avoided personally for each one of us, is to always keep in mind that we're not the only ones that have it rough, that we're not the ones that have suffered the worst, that there aren't other people that are suffering way worse. And I think that's when education, like educating yourself about what's actually going on around the world, like what other crazy atrocities and injustices are going around the world, is so important, because it really puts everything into perspective. All of a sudden you realize that actually you didn't have it that bad, or maybe you did, and it's okay for you to stand up and talk about it, because you, by talking about it, are helping other people make a difference as well, right? So this brings me up to another point. We may think that we're not activists because we're not leading up a riot or a protest, or we're not like Malcolm X or other leaders, but I disagree. I think that we are all activists. We all act, and our very actions have the power to transform lives or destroy them. We have a lot of power as individuals, whether we know how to speak well or not. We're all acting. This 11-year-old that Sosa Prabhu talked about today certainly made a big impact. He was 11 years old. He probably never went to school. He had a really difficult upbringing. That when I think about my life, it's like, I shouldn't even be speaking. Like, this person really suffered a lot. I haven't suffered anything in comparison. But this kid made a big impact. Unfortunately, it was a negative one. So we are all activists. We all have that power to transform lives or destroy them. We are leading by example. There's always going to be somebody that's looking to us to learn how to act, to learn how to speak, to learn how to deal with situations. If you don't think that you make that big of an impact in your society, well, at least in your household, around your friends. So I think this is also an important point, which really ties into how important it is to pay attention to your own personal development and to your community development. Like Sosa has brought it up so many times, the way we speak, the way we dress, the way that we decide to live our life. And it's not to say that it's not necessary to stand up against injustices when you see them and when you hear of them. I think it would be stupid not to do so, in whatever way you feel comfortable. But we do have the responsibility to make a change internally, personally, and at the same time, externally. And what does that look like? It's up to you to decide. Some people are taking up actions of protest through their social media, through words. Maybe just at home, they're changing the way that they're speaking to their wives, or their wives are speaking to the husbands, because actually a lot of domestic violence is from women to men as well. So it's really being afraid of becoming myopic, thinking and I think we talked about this, Sosa, at some point. This is what happened to me, and so through these lenses, I'm just going to judge the whole world, and it really isn't fair, I think, from any perspective. So how does that link to, for example, the white community? I mean, I haven't heard much about how many cops get killed on the job. A lot, probably a lot more than people of color have gotten killed by a cop. Unfortunately, I don't have the statistics, but I know I've been listening to a lot of these talks and conversations, and I can't remember numbers. But it's actually a much bigger number. So when we have the capability to step out of our own myopic situation and put ourselves in other people's shoes, I think that's when the magic happens. Feeling that pain that those police officers' families may have felt, or continue to feel every time they leave their home, because that's probably one of the biggest and most difficult jobs ever. And being able to feel what they would feel, that goes a long way. That's not to say that that one bad cop, and it's not bad, a cop that's very conditioned by materialism and they think that they are God because they have a gun and they are going to go shoot somebody because they don't look the same as them. There are those types of people, just like there are very racist people of color that I have personally met. That's not to say that you're going to be okay with somebody that is in power abusing their power for other not very honorable reasons, like such as racism. That's not okay. I stand against that. I will always stand against that. I'm not okay with that. But what I'm proposing is opening up our own perspective and really being so careful with not becoming so myopic to the point where we become racist ourselves in our fight for equality, or in our fight to oppose racism. And I think once each one of us starts living our life in that way, for a bigger yes, for a deeper conception of who we truly are, which only spirituality can give you, there's not going to be much change. So let's just go through a thought experiment. Let's imagine every person of color that goes out on the street with all of the possibilities of getting pulled over simply because we are not white, or whatever color the officer that might pull us over is, or we don't have enough money, or whatever it is, with all those misconceptions or conceptions because it's happened to us. All those people of color go out, but they're also thinking, I'm aware that other people also have it hard, that other people have also been through a lot, that other people are constantly being bullied and being victims of segregation, racism, or just violence at home, like whatever, something negative. I'm aware of all these things. And imagine if out in that world, everybody else is also thinking that way. The white cops, the white judges, and I'm saying white because unfortunately we think that the bad person is white, when really anybody could be that bad person. It depends on their mentality, not on their skin color. And we're all thinking the same way, being aware of other people, being aware of these differences, and being aware that we're not these bodies and everybody deserves respect. Like, it would be a totally different world. Why? Because we're engaging on a deeper level. We're no longer operating on that skin disease level. And when the duty hour comes, when somebody's doing something wrong and somebody that has the duty of protecting us has to do what they're supposed to do to protect the community, they do that. It's no longer based on race, or because they're friends, or because they're not friends, or because they had problems before and now this is a perfect opportunity to get payback or whatever it is, but simply because, hey, this is my duty, and according to the teachings, I'm not attached to the result, I'm just doing my duty. Like, that would be the most ideal of situations, right? Like, when we're hearing about, up to this point in the Gita, that a transcendentalist sees everything clearly, imagine, wouldn't it be nice for all, not only cops, but every person in an authority post to have this perspective on the world and in his own life, that he or she has to be a person of honor, integrity, of equal vision. Like, yeah, I want somebody like that to be the ones holding guns and protecting us, that are not going to be swayed by other things that are shallow and materialistic, such as race or gender or anything else. So yeah, I think that that it is necessary for us to put ourselves in other people's shoes, while we are opposing the things that we see that are not right. I think that also that revolution and that change has to start at home. I also think that the more that we deepen our knowledge in spirituality, the more change we can impart and spread in the world. And bringing it back to what Kim said, even those people that are struggling to find the necessary things to survive, we could be the agent of that change. A spiritualist is always thinking for the welfare of the world. It's not just like, oh yeah, just like say this name and you'll be saved for life, and it's like bye. It's like, no, it's spirituality is it's a lifestyle, it's a regular daily practice. So naturally you're developing more kindness and more heart for everybody, regardless of even what bodies they're in, towards animals, plants, ecology. So we see those people that are the most advanced. They're not the ones that are just at home turning on the TV and being like, well, I'm not going to say anything because I'm not a racist, so I'm not going to speak for the Black community or the white community or the... No, these are the people that are the best activists. They're going out there, they're talking about the truth and what we need to do to overcome all the injustices and inequalities that, like Sosa explained, are so natural to this material world. They're not idle. These spiritualists are very active, but they're acting for the highest purpose and the highest goal and the highest principle, and nothing can sway them because they're anchored on truth. And so I guess to wrap it all up, and of course there's so many details and nuances, that I could personally go into more detail about, but just for the scope of this conversation, I guess I wanted to leave you all with my own perspective on it, which is there has to be a combination of internal work, very serious, committed, honest work of honor on yourself, to be a better person, and simultaneously for you to speak up and out when you see something negative happening in the world, even just a joke. Microaggressions, we've heard so much about this. Microaggressions, little ways of being racist and excluding other people, little things like that you can speak about. So doing an external, I guess, protest against what's not helpful for your spiritual life and for others, and internal work, and together this could really provide powerful platform for change. And of course, through that work, you're going to develop more compassion for other people, and it's going to be harder for you to see yourself and your community and your race as us, and everybody else is them, and it's just our fight against them for something else. Because ultimately, if everybody's thinking in that way, we're never going to get to peace, because everybody's always going to see themselves as separate from one another, when in reality we're all connected as spiritual souls. And so it's the whole world is bleeding, the whole world is suffering, the planet is just getting depleted by our bad choices. We are killing each other, not only the Black community within themselves, the Latin community also, I'm sure the Asian community also, like every community in the world. We are our biggest enemies ourselves, and as such, it's now time to make a change, and seeing other people as the ones to blame isn't the way out, isn't the answer. That's the easy way out, to blame other people and to victimize yourself. A harder perspective and a harder position is to own your side of the story, take responsibility for the things that you have learned that are not good, and not blame your parents or your society, but take it. It's like, you're an adult now, you can stop those cycles, you can stop your racist comments, you can stop your weird destructive ways of whatever you do. now, today, actually is that easy. It just requires you to make that decision and stick by it. And imagine if everybody is doing the same thing. We would really be living in a different world. And couple that with spirituality and knowledge, it's like, man, we would see a change so fast. And there really wouldn't be much more to do, like externally, because if we're all doing that internal work, then we can see an external change. And yeah, you are an activist, you are actually an agent of change, and you have a lot of power. So now is the time for you to realize that and to take responsibility for your actions and your words and your thoughts. And it's up to us to make a change. What, you know, we hear this so much, but what is the type of world that we want our kids to live in the future? That's really something we should be thinking about. And it starts with us. And that's not to say that what's going on right now shouldn't be changed. That's not to say that all those people in power that are corrupt don't need to be kicked out of power, and the system needs to get reformed. Of course, that's not to say that it shouldn't happen. It should happen. But also, that change also needs to come from us as the people. And we have a lot of power, voting power, you know. Elections are coming up. We have a lot of opportunities here in the US that unfortunately around the world we don't so much. So for those of us that are here and have that opportunity to make a change externally, we should. And for everybody else that is in a much more difficult position, then at least we have that power to react differently to the things that we don't have control over. And that's where having a thick and deep spiritual tradition of that's logical, not just sentimental, right, fanatical, that's logical, can really lead us out of darkness in times of trouble, which are always coming, not just in 2020. So yeah, I just thank you for letting me share my perspective, and also how this verse really impacted me from the conversation last night by Tukram. It was powerful to be reminded of the fact that that a spiritualist has that responsibility to see how this world is actually working and see it for what it is, and lead others out of that darkness by their own example. So yeah.
Thank you, Varangi. Yeah, I really echo your message about being agents of change ourselves. I was mentioning to Tukram Prabhu last night that I am not an activist protester type, and I wish I was. I wish that if push came to shove, I could go to my cabinet and grab my gun and defend my family and home. And it's like, that's not me. And you know, he was emphasizing that it's not my dharma. You know, it's not my nature or what I'm supposed to do because of my nature. And so, you know, to find our role at this time in this movement can be tricky. And so I really liked your message about, okay, what can you do? What accountability can you take? You know, I've done a lot of studying in psychology, and before I got heavily into theology, I was into spirituality. And you know, psychology is all about, okay, how am I acting out of my projections or my triggers? And, you know, that's how we're all acting in today's world, whether, you know, it's a mean word that you say to someone, how you cut them down with your words, or, you know, maybe you have power at a job and how you make someone else's job more miserable, or, you know, and then you escalate more. Well, okay, now a policeman who has a lethal weapon, how are they getting triggered and then acting out on those triggers? And it's all, we have accountability, especially living in a first world country, being higher up on that Maslow's hierarchy, where we have our basic needs for most of us, or for, yeah, a lot of us in the first world country, having our basic needs met. And then I feel that we do have more accountability now to, okay, what are my triggers? What healing do I need? How can I, how do I want to live my life? How do I want to impact others? And like you said, that's going to affect a lot of change.
Totally. And I think maybe something that I should have brought up more of a emphasis on is the communities of color don't have as many resources for mental health, for health in general, social development, community development, all these things, sports for kids, community events. These are only things that are available to people of a higher social and economic status, and unfortunately different races fall into those categories a bit more. And so yeah, there is some reform that needs to be done. The system is not perfect, and I think by us engaging in this type of cry out for help, it's really important to be able to offer those healing, I guess, opportunities for these communities that have suffered from so much violence, just from living in the ghettos, you know, from seeing people die from a very young age, from getting burnt with cigarette butts, and just so many things that most of us have never gone through. So at some point, yeah, it's not only just a spiritual thing, like, okay, just surrender to whoever and then like your life is perfect. It's like, no, as part of that, we need to do some like actual material change. Like we need to have programs that helps these communities come out of that hole. And I think that's our responsibility for the human race in general, not just people from that community or people from certain races, you know? And so, yeah, because some people have had it harder than us, even within our own communities, we're at different levels. Material life means inequality by default. So we're never going to be equal materially. But if we have a spiritual vision, we can bring about those material changes for the right reasons, right? We don't go in and put a psychological healing center or whatever that's called, or colored community just because I want to get some votes in the election so I can become mayor. You know, like if you have a spiritual vision, you do that because you want to help these people heal so they can be better leaders in tomorrow, so that our kids don't become murderers at the age of 10, so our kids can go to school and actually become agents of change in the future when they have the ability to do so. And so the mentality really is what I'm pointing at here, and how it's everybody's responsibility to change the world. Like it's all of us, irrespective of what race we're a part of or what social or economic level we're at. We have to make these changes, and we have to lend a hand to these communities of color that are suffering a lot, and that they're finally speaking up about. And I think that's great. And I'm really proud of this time and everything that's been happening to let everybody know, hey, something has to change. And now it's up to us to take that and to see what's the best way that we can participate in this new wave, hopefully, of revolution that will benefit everybody, not just the Black community, not just the brown community, not just the white community, but just everybody as a whole. Yeah. So Prabhu, that you were gonna jump in and I cut you off. Sorry.
Really? I didn't realize that.
Well, we're almost out of time, so maybe Tadeo, if you want to, any closing thoughts that you have that you want to share?
Sure. I'm gonna do something that I really don't like. It's really not in my nature, but I have to, which is, Varangi, you spoke so nicely, and we oftentimes talk about, you know, the cup, is it half empty or is it half full? Like, I want to look like the cup is 99.99% full that you just spoke about. And it's really not in my nature to focus on the half empty, what to speak of the 0.001%, right? But because it's such a big part of what I'm discussing here, I feel like I have to point out for the benefit of others. And I think you yourself, I think you would agree. You said something, you said that Black people have been done wrong for so long, and that it is on their right to go out and protest and manifest themselves in whichever way they want to, right? I just want to speak to that a little bit, and perhaps I think maybe we can agree here. I don't think Black people should go out and protest in whichever way they want to, because what I have seen is Black people, not all and not everywhere, but I have seen many videos, and you guys can look it up, of Black people breaking Nike's stores, breaking Target stores, literally running up there, stealing stuff and coming out and setting local Pet Boys stores on fire, setting Target stores on fire, and just stealing their stuff. What is that going to accomplish? You know, so it is not about like go out and protest in whichever way you want to. Go out and protest in an intelligent way. Go out and protest in a way that is going to change in the most effective way the problem of inequality, and putting and setting a Target store on fire, setting a Nike store on fire, and robbing the things that are in there is only going to make so that those white people who actually own the store don't want to bring those stores into your communities anymore. Our own Tukaram Prabhu was concerned about this because he owns his restaurant in Long Beach. And there was a possibility that people were going to go there and break it all up. So then should he then stop because the Black people around there was not going to appreciate the fact that he's bringing a vegan, non-violent, spiritual food for them? You know, so yes, I think, like you said, I think they should go out and protest, but not in every way they want to, because they should do it in a more intelligent way than setting stores on local stores on fire. That's the very behavior that keeps other people discriminating against them. So I'm sorry for pointing that out. I think if you do you have a reply to that?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I think that's a very important point that actually so many people have been speaking about that. How it's not right to loot, how it's not okay to break in, how it's not okay to steal. I don't agree with that. I don't agree that
so.
you have to. Yeah,
Bringing it up.
yeah. I don't think that it's okay. I personally, I'm not a thief. I don't need to go break my racist's window to let him know that I'm hurt and that he's done something wrong.
Exactly.
But it's because I've had a different upbringing, because I had different opportunities that I think a lot of other people had. So it's easy for me to understand where they're coming from. And I think maybe some people can understand that too. So the fact that you can understand it doesn't mean that you agree with it. Now, I did say that you can express yourself in whatever way you want to. So I think that is a fault in that statement, because that would include anything. So does that mean that if I want to express myself in going to rape white kids because I'm Black and the white man lynched my cousin, so I'm going to go rape his kid? Like, is that okay? No, it's not okay. But it's not okay because I'm a spiritualist, because I think that two wrongs don't make a right.
Exactly.
Because you're not going to break that cycle of violence by going to do something way worse. Now you're the same as this lyncher. So exactly. You're not doing anything. But having said that, I wouldn't go so far to say you should only express yourself in this way. I don't agree with that either. I think that a lot of wrong has been done to this community, and it's understandable why all this anger that has been piled up for hundreds of years, all this rage, all this victimization, all this injustice that these people have grown up with in their blood, like a lot of people actually, like, that's actually their mentality, because they grew up in that setting. And like you said, mentioned in the last episode, the root is that it's slavery period, where it's actually like karma passed down, like a collective karma mentality kind of a thing. It doesn't surprise me, and it doesn't make me feel like, how could this happen? I mean, people that are in power, probably a lot of the owners of these multinational corporations, are doing way worse stuff. Like, a lot of them employ child labor in third world countries. What does that entail? Not only like they're engaging in modern slavery, but they're killing our ecosystems in the third world countries, and they're not getting prosecuted by anybody. Why? Because unfortunately, those countries kneel down to multinational corporations, because however the world is set up. So when I'm looking at it in that big picture, it's harder for me to say, you're a looter, stop it, you're bad. No, I think it's easier for me, I don't personally, for me to understand, like, yeah, maybe this is actually necessary for the needle to be moved, which is actually something that Tukram brought up in one of his classes. It's not to condone it. It's not to like say it's okay. It's not to say, good job, you should go out there and destroy and loot and like even innocent people also lose their jobs and their livelihoods because you went in and looted their restaurant, for example. So it's not to say that that's okay. But I also wouldn't go so far to say that everybody that looted is Black, or that we shouldn't do that because we don't want the white owners to not bring those stores to our communities. I mean, like, no, I think that if I can understand that that this is happening because of the whole story of oppression that this community in particular has gone through. And so I think my perspective is nuanced. It's not so like one way or the other. But at the same time, yeah, if I had the opportunity to speak to a group of looters, I obviously wouldn't say, good job, guys, like that's the way to do it. But I would be like, okay, let's talk about like what's triggering you. Like, how are you connecting the dots? Like what do you hope to accomplish with this? And I'm sure a lot of them is just like, I don't know, I don't even care about the protest, I just wanted some free stuff, like, so there's always going to be those types of people
if you
involved.
did that, it's what I am trying to do here, and what I see as a problem, that maybe they're not being told that, hey, let's connect the dots.
Mm,
Where is this action ultimately going to take us?
yeah.
Nobody has done that. That's why they're doing it. It's obvious to see, because you wouldn't let your children do it. I know that. I
No.
wouldn't let my children do it. And everybody who we honor that we know, that they wouldn't let their children do it either. So perhaps nobody has told them that. And that's what I am here saying. I'm here like, please, my brothers and sisters, it is not right to do it. And like I don't, like you said, we don't want to put them in a bubble that, oh, you can go out, but you can only protest in this particular way. Actually, it's the opposite. Go out and do whatever you want, just not this particular way, because this particular way, it's not right. That's what I would tell my children. I think you would tell your children that too.
Yes.
And my last point, I know we're running out of time, is that, like, it's quite clear that I believe 80% of the work should be done inside, from Black to Blacks. But then again, a wholesome approach and understanding from all points. So what can be done from the outside? I feel that to say, oh, we have to stand up and do something is too vague. It's part of what I didn't like the traditional religions that I came from. And Prabhupada gave us very specific ways in which we could make spiritual progress, and I really appreciated that. So to participate in that as well, here's something that Tukaram also brought up, and I had exact same realization, and I think his complements mine and vice versa. What can be done to minimize white cops discriminating against Black people is more training. It has been proven by the New York Police Department. They had 4-month training for cops before they could go out in the streets and serve. They had to go through a 4-month period of training. It was the same in South Chicago. It is the same in South Chicago, 4 months. The New York Police Department identified, hey, what can we do to stop this unjust acts by cops? And they then started 2 extra month period of training. So then now they're 6 months. And since then they have been collecting data, and they have been able to minimize the unjust violence committed by white cops towards Black people. It worked. So perhaps this is an idea. This is a specific something that we can do to stop the small number of white cops that are bad, that are out there discriminating against Black people and mistreating Black people. They should have more training. And the other one that Tukaram Prabhu brought up, which I thought was a phenomenal idea, they should all be trained in personal combat without a lethal weapon. They should all have some kind of martial art training. They should be physically strong people that are capable of engaging in combat, hand-to-hand combat, without having to pull a gun and kill somebody. Now, obviously, if cops are in a situation where others are pointing guns at them, then they're going to have to protect themselves with their own guns. But if it's a situation where there's an unarmed Black person, like the young Black man that was running around and got shot for no reason, if there's a situation like that, then you don't have to default to a weapon. You can just engage with a non-law-abiding citizen and engage in combat without having to pull a gun and default to a gun. If you train that way, so many of these unfortunate scenarios could have been prevented. So I think those are two ideas that are worthwhile circulating to stop white cops from hurting Black people. So I just want to share a thought on that, to specifics of what I think can be done to minimize the situation as well.
I have one more question. I think this is important. I think maybe these are questions that other people have. So if that's okay with you, I mean, just to ask you regarding the way that the protest, how they led to looting and destruction of property. I guess it's a question that I want to know what you think, because I certainly have an answer to that. And is because of what happened in this round of protesting, a lot of positive changes have come from that, because the pockets have been touched, money has been touched, economy has been touched, and just like you said, capitalism moves more than anything else, right? Now, do you think that a lot of these positive changes that we've seen in the law, just like the fact that some of these people were prosecuted for the heinous acts that they committed, do you think that if the protests haven't happened, those changes would have happened on their own?
What do you mean by protest? Because there was more than just one protest.
The protests that have happened, like just around the world, that inevitably there's always a risk of the I don't want to say violence, because there could be positive violence, but like destruction of property and things like that. That's a natural risk of a big group of people getting together. That's it's a risk that you run. So my question is, and again, I already have an answer, a personal answer, but I want to know what you think. Do you think that a lot of the changes that have come from that level of protesting, which included the unfortunate side effects of destruction of property and other things, do you think these effects, these changes in the law and the way that our leaders are responding to the inequality in interaction with different races would have happened without this protest, including all the negative things that happened with them?
No, I don't think it would have brought about as many changes. I also don't think that in materialism we can do anything that is perfect. Only in the spiritual level we can do such things. So we are going to do things that bring about positive and negative reactions. The whole of it cannot be perfect, just like any other material attempt. But if I was to look at all of the protests and the bigger attention that it brought, and therefore the changes that are going to come about from that, and say, is there a part of those protests that I would eliminate and still believe that the same results have been brought about? I would say yes, absolutely. We could keep all the protests in the way they were done, And I believe you brought about the exact same changes. Even if we were to eliminate all the littering, all the destruction of uh, stores that there were. And the reason why I think that is because if we magnify this example and we think about Gandhi, who single-handedly, non-violently defeated the entire British Empire. He used non-violence. That was, again, I'm not proposing that we should go there and do like a non-violence protest. What I am saying is that the loitering, the destruction is not positive in either way. That if you take all the protests as a whole, that particular aspect could be taken out, and still all the changes, the positive changes that will be brought about would still be brought about. Because
Right.
again, Gandhi was able to defeat the entire British Empire without ever setting any one store on fire. And that's a whole lot. That's the British Empire that were oppressing Indians in India, and that Gandhi did without any violence of any kind. That's powerful. That's one man, one idea that defeated an entire military army, which is very powerful at that particular point in time. So Martin Luther King said the same thing, that loitering, violence is not going to bring about the results we want. So yes, absolutely the protests are necessary. And it is the very thing that is going to bring about all the results. It could do without the loitering.
We could do a better job in that department.
Correct.
And you're saying that if that wouldn't have happened, you still think that the changes we've seen could have still happened. I disagree. I don't think so.
Gandhi brought up the entire British Empire. So it's
yeah,
kind of difficult to make an argument like that, because if one man, one philosophy of Gandhi, I mean, so what would you say to Gandhi then? You'd say, hey, you didn't.
I mean, no, that's great. I think it's great. I don't think I'm so informed in like all the details about the whole Gandhi situation, just like I'm not informed about all the details about here, like what happened. But just from being alive for 32 years, I don't even know how old I am, 32 years, I think, I've seen that suffering and uncomfortable situations are often not even often, they're actually a part of every change. Like change doesn't come just like from positive things happening. We see that we make a change because we want to avoid pain, we want to avoid suffering. And so some type of suffering is always there. It doesn't have to be that way. I agree with you. But unfortunately, from just like history teaching that and just me being alive, I realized that sometimes I even feel uncomfortable saying sometimes, all the time, I have seen that in order for something to actually move the needle to something to change, something uncomfortable has to happen. And I agree with you. It doesn't have to be that way. I think we could have done a better job, but I don't feel qualified to judge those people that acted the way they did, because I understand to some extent, not fully, obviously, because I didn't grow up that way, but to some extent why they would think that's the way out. And from seeing all the crazy good changes, fast changes that have happened already, in a way it's like, okay, if that's the way it happened and it had to happen, great, let's move on with this positive change, and let's not try to repeat that. Let's try to do better by working on ourselves, by everything that we've talked about, and move forward with this. But I guess maybe we could agree to disagree on that point. But I do think that those uncomfortable things or suffering or loss of some type must happen in order for real change to take place, especially from people that are mostly untouched all the time. That's talking about the 1% super rich people that own probably most of the world. And when their pockets are touched, they have to move. They have to do some changes because the people are just getting tired of getting treated the same way. And again, I agree. I think it would be wonderful to find a different way, but I can understand why these things happened. And hopefully we can do a better job as a human race to get rid of those negative aspects going forward. And hopefully we don't have to get to this extreme for other people that have the possibility to make some changes to make them without so many things being lost. But I do think, bottom line, that sometimes we have to run that risk of suffering and loss in order for things to change. And I do think that's definitely something that was probably one of the main reasons why we got so many changes done this round, this last wave of protests, I guess I would say.
All right. Well, thank you both for such a lively discussion. I got a lot of value out of it, and I'm sure everyone listening did as well. And if anyone wants to write in or let us know how you're feeling, feel free to do so either on social media or our website, simplelivinghighThinking.net. And yeah, thank you for joining. Thank you for listening. And thank you guys.
Thank you.
And we'll see you again next week. Haribol.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for joining us on Simple Living High Thinking. Please subscribe as new episodes post every Monday. You can tune into this podcast live every Saturday at 3 p.m. Pacific Time. Check out our website for more details at simplelivinghighThinking.net. And if you would like to nominate someone for a devotee spotlight interview, contact us via our website at simplelivinghighThinking.net.